Alright, welcome back to the NoFX Podcast. This is episode number 10, and once again, we have a set review for you. Although this time we are going to be doing things a little bit differently, mainly because, well, it's not that the set's bad. The set has a lot of cool cards, a lot of things that I'm excited for multiple formats, but just not a definitive, like, there are so many good cards for CEDH that it's hard to narrow this down to just 10. We've been doing a top 10 every time. In this case, we're just going to be reviewing some honorable mentions and our official list of the best cards that we think are the best for CEDH. But again, we're not even at 10 there. We actually have more honorable mentions than the full list. But I'm your host, Lane. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Kirk. How's it going, bud?
Not bad. What's going on, man?
Not much. How was your trip to the islands?
The land of Izzet. It was good. I'm extremely happy to be home. It's nice to be back in my bed and my surroundings with my magic cards. So
yeah, Any extended long times. I mean, I've done the Command Fests in Vegas a few times, and in a couple of the cases, like the last time I went, I ended up actually going solo. The couple times I went before, I had a couple friends that went with me, and that was a little bit more... It's a toss-up. It was a little more tolerable because, like, I had people there that I knew with me, but then it also sucked because they were annoying. So, like, I was stuck in a room with two of them for, the whole weekend. And this last time I went by myself, I brought my PS Vita, and I, like, just hung out, ordered pizza, played video games on my thing, and then, like, went to the Magic thing by myself. I played with randoms. It kind of sucked in that regard. Like, there wasn't that dedicated group to go run around and do Vegas things with. But, yeah, by, like, the end of the second, I think I got there went out Thursday, or maybe it was Friday. I think I went out Thursday night, and then spent that first night by myself. Super hyped. Went in on the thing on Friday. They had it in this little, like, side hall thing that kind of sucked. It was a lot different than the other times I had gone. Not the greatest experience, but then, long story short, just by, like, the end of the second day, I was like, I don't even really want to be here anymore. I just want to go home. So, yeah, I feel you.
The older I get, the more I become a cave bear, I'm pretty sure.
I think that happens to all of us, the social dynamics. I mean, I still love a good, like, social gathering, and I still do them, but it's more like once or twice a month instead of, like, 3 or 4 times a week like it used to be, so...
Yeah, I don't know. I'm the older I get, the more I like sleeping in my own bed more than anything, man.
For sure. Yeah, hotel bed's not the greatest.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of housekeeping to follow up from last episode. If you're not familiar, last episode we did our first Brewmaster chat, which is where we drank some beers and talked about a brew that we both built and had some differences in cards. And at the end, I asked, with the deck list and everything in the show notes, that people take a look and which deck they thought they would prefer to play. So we got a couple comments on the YouTube, actually just within the last couple days, so perfect timing. Thank you for responding, y'all. First comment was from Oxhawk2000. He says, sorry, both decks look fun, and the angles to win are both kind of the same lean. One has a Storm package, and the other Blink. There are cards from both I like, and then those that they wouldn't use. He said he couldn't give a more definitive answer than that. Well, I said, obviously we appreciate the reply. So there wasn't really a definitive you win or you win. It was mostly just they could see why we made the choices we made and that they had some of their own opinions. So who knows? Maybe that person will take one or the others of our list and make it their own. And that's basically what we were aiming to do anyway.
Yep.
Second comment was from Chris, and I'm sorry, your username is... I assume your last name, I cannot pronounce that properly, so I'm not going to even try. But Chris says, I love the different versions of the same commander. Even though there are only 17 cards different, they seem like they play completely differently. For me, I'd probably prefer Kirk's list to play. I love more mid-range decks, and who doesn't like Dockside loops? Islane's version seems more dependent on Broodlord combo. Kirk's pile to get Rooftop Storm going seems pretty damn cool. And I replied that that's fair. That I am too on the Rooftop Storm plan, but yes, I am going through the Broodlord, whereas Kirk did the Rectors and other things. And that also I wanted to have Breach and the Thorkel stuff for redundancy, but that either deck slaps, and I personally have seen us both win with it. So I think it was a pretty successful project. We're going to end up doing more of that in the future for sure. But Chris, Oxock, thank you both for the comments, and hope to hear from you guys again in the future. I would normally ask the kind of stuff that maybe you've been working on recently, but again, this is probably obvious. Like, I built we're going to be doing this Saturday a stream with myself, Kirk, my friend Joey, and our other friend Squee. We're all going to be bringing some brand new Lord of the Rings commanders to the table in CDH, like, sort of power level. So that's basically what I've been working on. I made a CPDH deck and a casual deck as well from cards from this set, but that's the majority of it. You have anything? Oh well, yeah. We're gonna end up talking about one of your more recent projects here in a little bit, anyway. So I guess we'll jump right into it. So this is the Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering set review. The summer set. We are getting, the normal boosters, set boosters, collector boosters. This I think there's 5 commander decks with this one. I haven't even really paid attention to the commander. I haven't been paying attention to commander decks at all recently because they just keep shitting them out. Regardless, I think some of the cards that we are talking about were in some of those precons, but whatever the case.
You know what? Real quick, I gotta jump in. So, what's the official name of this fucking set? Is it Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth? Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Keep them all straight. Okay, perfect.
It's essentially the same thing that we had last year, or was it the year before, with Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. This is kind of like the core set replacement where they're doing this Universe Beyond shit instead of it being like the Warhammer 40k where it's just commander decks. In this case, it's a full-on set. And in that regard, I appreciate it a little more. I think those commander precons for 40k were fine, but like there was only a handful of cards I actually cared about. In this case, I guess there's also only a handful of cards that we were really caring about, but I'm a Lord of the Rings stan more so than 40k, so there you go.
Same.
Either way, so we've got a lot of honorable mentions here, but we are going to run through them pretty quick because there's not a lot to say about them. Some are good, some are bad, but they're things that I've seen the community talk about on social media, etc. We've seen some stuff on Reddit. Also, by the way, Reddit is acting weird, and we can't see some of the EDH channels that used to be there. Don't know what's going on with that. If you know anything about it, let us know. Without further ado, let's get into them. I guess we can just take turns. I'll lump these first two together. Well, actually, you lump these first two together since you put them on the list, and then we'll move on to the next.
Lucky me. So are we talking
the 2 lands?
Minas Tirith and Mount Doom? All right, so the first, Minas Tirith, Minas Tirith, Minas Tirith. Hell if I know. Anyway, that one.
I think it's Minas.
I think so, too. Anyway, legendary land, enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature, taps for a white mana, and it's got an ability, activated ability of 1 pip, 1 white, tap, draw a card, activate only if you've attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn. So, mono white draw ability is where we're probably going to see this. Decks like Islane's Giada list. I'm not sure if Heliod will play this. I guess I'll try it in my Heliod list. I don't often attack with 2 creatures, but I'll give it a whirl.
It's definitely a slam dunk in Giada because she's 2 mana. You get her down early. You also can get several other creatures down fairly early, and attacking with 2 is pretty easy, and then you've got the ability. This is that chivalric that came out, the chivalric alliance that came out in March or 1. That was the enchantment version of this, where if you attack with 2 creatures, you draw a card. It's the same thing as stapled on a land. I thought that card sounded good in multiple white X, low color decks that want the extra card draw. I think this is the same thing, but it's also a land. It does come in tapped if you don't have your commander, but if you have a low costing, low color commander that you're gonna pop out early turns, this is gonna be great, in the early to mid game, or even better late game when you've already definitely got your commander out. You're not
your commander. So if you play cheap legends too, but
yeah, if you're in Legendary Matters decks, sure, yeah. I mean, because there is like Skrelv, Ragavan, and other things, so like it could potentially come down untapped on turns 1 or 2 potentially, but nothing too crazy. But white getting even more card draw is just, I love it.
It's never a bad thing. Yeah, I mean, War Room sees play. This is kind of a similar-ish thing. So, moving on. Mount Doom. This one is legendary land, comes to play untapped. Tap it, pay 1 life, add black or red to your mana pool. And it's got an activated ability of a colorless black-red, tap. It deals 1 damage to each opponent. It's got another ability. It's like 5 black-red, tap. Sack it, sack a legendary artifact, sack your mortgage, your car, your house, your marriage. Jesus Christ. You know, the last ability is never going to be activated.
Never.
It's just tap for black, red, pay a life, and or tap black, red, colorless, tap it, deal damage to each opponent. Where this will see play is Worldcorger Dragon decks, because as you're looping, you don't have to have another target in the grave, like you might have to traditionally with Worldcorger Dragon decks, because every time you loop this, you create infinite mana, activate this. On resolution of everybody dying, then you can stop your loop because they're dead. So that's where this will see play.
The floor is it's another Rakdos Painland, which is not bad. Rakdos and or Grixis are going to like this, even if they're not using the other abilities, just because it's an additional land. Notably, it could also be tutored up with something like Search for Glory if you're in Mardu. So if you're on a Mardu, I used to run Worldgorger and Kalia. So if you're on Worldgorger Kalia, this can be tutored with that tutor. If you're in green for some reason, I don't know why you would be, but you could get it with a crop rotation.
Sisay, the white green one. Is it Sisay? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, either way, having a... It's also, like, I'm going to run it in Shanid because it's a legendary land. It draws me a card. Otherwise, I don't care about the rest of it. It's just a legendary land that draws me a card, but it's in my colors because it's Mardu. So I think it's good. Notably, Mardu and or anything with red-black that's on Worldgorger. There are a couple other... There's that Volderin Epicure, which is like ETB, deal 1 damage. There's also the Dragon, Boggart, and Hellkite. There are some other options that do the same thing where people die before you have to close the loop, so it doesn't matter. So it's not the only thing, but... Being on a land, it's innocuous. It's there, and people are just like, okay, whatever. It's just a land. And then you go, slam Worldgorger, win. And then they're like, oh, shit. So.
And having just another outlet, I was once told by somebody that came into my work, redundancy is a good thing. Now let me explain. So there you go. Moving on. Let's go to the next one that you threw on the list here, buddy.
All right. This one is Lossarnach Captain. This one is a mono white. It's 3 and a white for a 3/1 first strike. When it's a human soldier. Whenever it or another human ETBs under your control, you tap target creature an opponent controls. So in a way, a little bit of a hate bear, kind of expensive, but you know, being able to tap down stuff that you're trying to get through is a very mono white sort of thing. It's also notably a soldier, so if you are playing like a mono-white Myrel, this could be a slam dunk just because, you know, it's more soldiers to get your count up. It also, additionally, at the beginning of each of your upkeeps, you create a 1/1 human soldier creature token. So if you're doing token shenanigans or sacrifice stuff, you know, it's fodder. It could be, again, for Myrel, it's going to buff up your count. Where I think that this potentially lands is Winota. I don't know if there's a good enough cut for it. But in my particular Winota list, I'm already running Adeline and Myrel and some other stuff that's soldier, you know, adjacent or human adjacent or whatever you want to say, to where there's synergies built in. But also this is something that can come down. You attack with your non-human, this comes down, and then the first turn, it's not... oh no, it is just ETB. So it doesn't matter that it's coming in, tapped and attacking. It's not an attack trigger, it's an ETB. So you can automatically tap down some blockers. It's also going to have Indestructible when it comes down because of Winota's ability, but like maybe something you attacked with doesn't. So now you tap down the thing that could kill that. Who knows? But either way, it's just going to make more attackers on top of that. So I think it's got potential. It's not a slam dunk, and that's why it's on the honorable mentions. It's only going to go in maybe 1 or 2 lists, but it's still pretty cool.
Yep, I'm going to try it. I'm brewing an Eowyn Shield Maiden list. I'm going to throw it in and give it a whirl because that's one that cares about humans.
Yeah, I mean...
So, who knows?
Tribal human decks, it's good. If you're not on that sort of thing, then probably not as good.
Yep.
All right, so the next two, I'll read off this one because I actually put it on here. But these
Sounds
next
good.
two, we saw some. I've seen some commentary on both of these next two cards.
A lot of hype. A lot of hype on these.
Hype as if that they're... I don't know if people just...
Misguided hype, in my opinion, as well, but we'll talk about it.
Honestly, I don't know where it's coming from. Okay, so first one, Cavern-Hoard Dragon. It's a 9 mana, so it's 2 red and 7 dragon.
Good lord, is it 9? Oh, that's even worse.
It's 9 freaking mana. So, I mean, it does have a caveat. The spell costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest number of artifacts an opponent controls. So you'd think...
An opponent. Only one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That is the kicker. If it was the same as Dockside, where it costs less to cast for the number of artifacts everyone controls, then getting to that 7 pretty easy, and a 2 mana 6/6 with flying, trample, and haste, pretty decent. Probably sees play in a lot of decks at that rate. Then additionally, whenever it attacks, or I'm sorry, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token for each artifact that player controls. So you get the cost reduction based on how many they have, and because it has haste, you can swing in immediately and get that many treasures. So yes, it is essentially a Dockside, but it's not, because it's only one player. There are those games where you have a Dockside in your hand, you only get 3 treasures off of it, and that's including enchantments. This is just bad. And the only way, the absolute only way I see this seeing any sort of play in CDH is either Magda or Kaalia. Kaalia more likely, just because Kaalia doesn't care about any of its text except for it deals damage, it creates treasures. She cheats it into play for free. It hits somebody for 6. It makes 2, 3, 5, 10 treasure tokens. You can now cast your Villas or whatever other bullshit's in your hand that's too expensive. It's a nice little ritual. It's whatever. I think that actually it's probably not bad in Kaalia. And that's literally the only place I think that it's any good. Even, as I mentioned, Magda, yeah, you could cheat it into play with 5 treasures, which is definitely cheaper. And maybe there's somebody on the board that has more than that 5, so you're still mana positive. But why wouldn't you just go get your Clock of Omens or something else that's going to actually win you the game? So with Kaalia, it's the same thing, except for Kaalia cheats and stuff from your hand. So if this is in your hand, it makes sense, but I still don't know that it's even really worthwhile. I think overall it's kind of garbage, and I think maybe it's people saying that it's fixed Dockside or that it's good and casual. I don't know, but I'm probably not playing it anywhere.
Same. We'll go to the one that I have a lovely disdain for next. Display of Power. 2 red, 1 colorless, instant. This spell can't be copied. Haha, suck it, Kark Sakashima. Anyway. Copy any number of target instant and or sorcery spells. You may choose new targets for the copy. The 2 decks I could maybe see playing this, and sure, someone will correct me when I'm wrong and break it, and I'll look like a fool, and that's fine. But it's Vadric, and then there's the Mizzix, the Magnus, whatever the hell it is. The 2 that make your instants and sorceries cheaper. Maybe you do some weird storm stuff with cards that are drawing cards and making treasures and looping weird crap. But
Mizzix can reduce this by 1, so it's just Fork. But then Fork can still be copied. I had some people on my server on the Discord that posted this and started going on and on about how good this was. And I took a first glance and I was like, okay, this spell can't be. I was like, dude, everything you just said is completely invalidated because of the first line of text. I was like, RTFC. And they were like, oh shit. I'm like, yeah. I mean, I've done it before too, where I was super hyped on a card and then did not realize that something didn't add up. And in this case, why would you run this when you could be running bonus round or any, like, Fork, any other card that's going to allow you to actually copy what you want? Even if you do, like I said, do bonus round or whatever. I guess the only way this is really good is if you have Mizzix's Mastery. This is in your grave along with a lot of other stuff, and you Mizzix's Mastery overloaded so that you put everything else on the stack first, then this, and this copies everything else.
So what you're telling me is it's excellent in a win more scenario.
Yes, and also, there's not going to be any sorceries that you can copy because it all needs to be instant speed. The only way this is ever copying a sorcery is if somebody initially casts a sorcery and then somebody else casts an instant on top of it, and like how much of that is actually happening where this is going to be beneficial for you. It's not even as good.
Like unlikely.
I mean, it's not even as good as, like, I'd rather be running Dualcaster Mage than this. Honestly, because
Absolutely.
Dualcaster is going to flash in, you're going to get a body, and you're going to copy whatever you wanted to copy, or it's going to win you the game. So yeah, this is hot garbage.
Yeah, there'll be some decks that will play this. I just don't think the card's good. End of my story. What do you got up next?
We'll skip down to this one since I put it on the list. It's Lost to Legend. This is a very niche mono white instant removal spell. It costs 2 white, and it says put target non-land historic permanent into its owner's library 4th from the top. So the absolute closest thing to this is Unexpectedly Absent. But that's 2 white pips and X is the number of cards like down it goes in the library. This is specifically for, which is plenty deep, unless they have amazing card draw. This gets rid of, well, the issue is that it's historic only. So it can get rid of a problematic artifact like a Winter Orb or something that's fucking your day up. Sagas are probably never going to get targeted. So it's basically artifacts or legendaries. And in that regard, this basically reads, destroy target commander. Artifact is going to disappear, it's going to come back. The commander, they're not going to allow it to be tucked, so it's going to go into the command zone. So for 2 mana to blow up a problematic commander, it could be good, but I think this is super narrow, probably only being played in mono white decks, and that's it.
Feels like it could have been 1 white and 1 pip instead of double white also.
Sure. I mean, it's obviously, like, this, when we did our, best instance in the format, like, this doesn't hold a torch to Path or Swords or any of the other ones that we... It's cool. It has its uses, but it's not quite there. So.
Yeah, it can't hit Heuristic Study. It can't hit, I think, a Rule of Law effect, because most of those are non-legendary creatures or enchantments. So it does a thing, but it's not great. I agree.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's not, back to we were just talking about some of the decks that might play a multitude of legendary creatures. Sure, it might be able to get rid of like a Myrel for a few turns. Like, I mean, there are going to be some edge cases where it's pretty good. But again, pretty much only in mono white. I know the couple times I have brewed mono white decks, like I had an Adeline deck I don't play anymore. I had a, what's the gnome? Oswald. I played that when it first came out. I remember deep diving for removal because it was just like, there's not enough. This is all garbage. And this is the kind of thing that I might have put in that deck, but yeah, honestly, not great. So we can move on.
Cool. We'll jump up to Samwise Gamgee. So this one, it's green-white, legendary halfling peasant. Interesting. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a food token. Sacrifice 3 foods, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand, and it's a 2/2 body. Where this card might see play, and the reason it's on this list, is if you're in an Abzan Protean Hulk style deck, you can loop Cauldron Familiar, and then either Carrion Feeder and or Viscera Seer. So there's those 2, that's 4 total mana pips. Leaves you 2, you could go find a Grand Abolisher with them as well. You could do a protected loop with your Cauldron Familiar. Interesting. Not sure if it'll ever see play, or if it'll be the new hotness, but that's where this is on the considering, just for Protean Hulk. New Protean Hulk lines that don't require you playing, like Malira, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think out of the cards you mentioned, all less dead than what the typical, like, Golgari pile is, because it plays a lot of cards that are just awful outside of the combo, Malira included. This one, the issue is that this now needs to be jammed into an Abzan commander, and I don't really think of any of them as being really, like, Protean Hulk style lists. It's not to say you couldn't do it, it's just, like, that's not what I think of. However, you could have access to, like, Arena Rector and Vivian, so you could do pod lines into this, or whatever the case may be. So there are options there. I think, notably, just the any creature entering, not tokens, obviously, but any non-tokens entering makes a food. Foods have been, up till this set, pretty outside of, like, that Cauldron Familiar with, like, Witch's Oven loop that we've known about for years. Food's always been underwhelming. I've always thought, why is this even a thing? Never thought it was really good enough. And this set actually, there's a lot of cards I could have put on this honorable mention list just specifically because of food, because they've actually given some pretty decent outlets for the artifact type. So we're not going to talk about any of those other ones to my knowledge or that I can recall, but just be aware that there are some cool outlets. There's a Peregrine 2. There's a couple other ones. There's a mono black thing that, like, every time you sack a food, it gets bigger, and then if you sack it does damage. It's kind of like Jury, the Rakdos commander that gets the counters, and then when it dies, you can target stuff. But yeah, either way, it's interesting. I don't know that Abzan is the best color for that, but you just demonstrated a loop, a win con, so maybe somebody can build it.
I think the Abzan decks that do Hulk now is looking. A lot of them do like Karmic Guide type loops, and those are fine because those are probably stronger cards. But this could be maybe in a shell that also wants to do, as weird as it sounds, maybe an Ad Naz / Protean Hulk list where Protean Hulk's your only big hit, because these are all a lot cheaper. I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
we'll see.
Also, if you're an Abzan, you could be doing Ikra with like one of the mono white commanders, and
or Ikra Timna or something, you know.
Yeah, and they have that ability to gain a bunch of life to do the Ad Naz into it. Notably, too, there was that I can't remember her name. We talked about her in the honorable mentions. I think it was with Mom. It was actually Malira, notably, but it's the Celestia one that came out in one, and that was the one where you could exile it and choose a creature, put it that if it was put in the graveyard, return it to the battlefield. So it was essentially a secondary kind of Safi. I didn't actually ever end up putting it in the list, but it is the kind of thing that could maybe go into that list as being another way to potentially, sack your Protean Hulk if you can put it on the field, or when you do that initial pile, you could then use her to get it back and get other stuff if you needed. Whatever.
Definitely potential there. And the sack 3 foods, return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. That could have some uses too, outside of just the Hulk loops. So this one's got potential. We'll see.
Yeah. This is one that you put on here, but I'll talk about it anyway. This one is Nasty End, which people were very happy about, especially in like the Pauper end of it, because it's essentially Tevish's +1 ability. But so it is a instant for 1 and a black, and it says as additional cost to cast the spell, sack a creature, you draw 2 cards. If the sacrificed creature was legendary, you draw 3 instead, which is exactly what Tevish's +1 does. The only reason we didn't put this on the main list is because it's really only gonna see play probably for CDH in decks with Rograk. Just because he's 0, you put him out, you pay 2, and you draw 3. You could do that early game, you could do that mid game, you could do that whenever. It seems pretty good. For the Pauper guys, this is just potentially, more than likely, it's sack your commander to draw 3 cards, and in some cases that's not bad because some of the commanders are pretty cheap, but yeah. I don't know if I would be playing it in that format, but either way, I think it's probably something I might put in my Timna Roger list just to test it out. I think it could be potentially pretty good, especially even post Naz, because sometimes you have him out early, you use him to turbo into the Naz, and then now you sacrifice him to draw even more, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, not terrible.
Let's see, an interesting one. Let's see, what should we do next? The Lotho, is that the one I'm on next?
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go with Lotho Corrupt Shirriff.
He's the Sheriff. Sheriff
of Shire. It is. Oh man, sorry, it's late. Anyway, it's 1 black and 1 white for a 2/2 legendary halfling rogue. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you lose 1 life and create a treasure token. I'm much higher on this one than his lane, admittedly. I think this will see play in Timna decks, like Timna Roger, Timna Jessica. Maybe?
I think if you're an Orzhov, this is good. Well, there's this card and another card that we're going to talk about later that have been printed in this set that kind of help it out a little bit. Maybe not like amazingly, but a little bit. Anyway, Orzhov kind of struggles with combos. It has for a while. There are some known quantities, but it's just typically it's either really stacksy with some less than desirable combos in it, or it's, just trying to kill with combat or drain the table with aristocrats type stuff. This guy drains you, which is not great, but getting the extra free. It was on. Sorry, what was it on?
On second spell cast each player. So
Yeah,
it's
they've been adding
the Fairy Mastermind draw. This one's just get a treasure.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of this lately, where it's like if they draw 2 cards, you get one. If they draw or they cast 2 things, you get something, and that's fine. That's good. I don't think I put this in my Tim and Roger list just because I'm already on Professional Facebreaker and Grim Hireling, and they're just gonna make me more treasures more often, I think, than this.
Did I say it's a 2/2 or 2/1? It's a 2/1. I don't remember now. Good lord. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
Whatever the case, I mean, it is a Timna attacker if it comes down early. Sure, you could curve into Timna after this, to where, it's out. Maybe you're drawing cards with it, and so it's not doing nothing. And then also, if anybody does a couple things per turn, if you get it down early, sure. But I don't know. I like the effect. I just don't know that it's really doing a whole lot. It's just some value.
I like the fact that they made it legendary, which is very weird, but I do like the fact that they did that because it helps in those decks where you're rocking Mox Amber. So instead of just giving red from Roger, you'll get red, black, white with this in play.
I think
even if you don't have Temna in yet.
I think I could see it more in like Shanid, because that's a Legendaries Matter deck where this is in the colors, and then maybe it actually helps with, some mana ramp. In that case, I might put it on the considering there. But it's definitely going to be in a Legendaries Matter kind of deck, I think, more often than not. But yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Like I said, I think I'm higher on this one than his lane, but I could be right. He could be right. Who knows?
We'll see. I'm definitely higher on this one than Kirk. This is the next one is Flowering of the White Tree. It is, honestly, the first time I saw this, I thought it was a legendary land, and I was like, slam dunk. This is amazing. And then I realized it was an enchantment. I was like, okay, so now it's just a slam dunk in Sithis, which cares about enchantments. So 2 white, legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1 and have ward 1. And then your non-legendary creatures just get +1/+1. So it's a basic white anthem. However, in that particular deck, for 2 mana, I'm drawing a card because this is on the board. I'm gaining a life because that's part of her trigger as well. And now she's a 3/3 because she's a 1/2, I believe, and has ward 1, which not a huge amount, but every little bit helps. And normally she's not a prime target, but I have had her removed because she's a card draw engine, or she's part of a combo, or whatever. So, and then just getting the 1/1 across the board, not terrible. I also think that this could be good in decks that are, either mono white or like Boros, etc., where they're going to have a lot of small hate bears and things that the buff. I mean, there's a reason why Elish Nor gets played. She only gives +2/+2. This is +1 less on toughness, but is also giving ward to some of them. And then otherwise it's +1/+1 across the board. It's 2 mana as opposed to 6 or 7. So I would argue
Elish Norn's played more for the -2/-2 than anything, just to nerf little dorks all across the board.
Sure.
I do like this card. I mean, it's infinitely better than the card that's now permabanned in Crusade, because it does give non-legendary creatures you control +1/+1. Doesn't care if it's red, green, white, black, blue. Doesn't matter. Ward 1, not the worst, like you said. In a stacks build where you're trying to tax their mana and tax their ability to do multiple things in a turn, every little bit does count. My biggest problem with it is without a legend or a board presence in play, this doesn't do a whole lot for 2. So
yeah, that's fair. And like I said, I think that is really the only deck where it's like, oh, this is a slam dunk. The some of the stacks decks it may be a consideration, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it makes it. And that's fine.
The reason it's on our considering.
And then the next one is several cards in a stack, mainly because individually they may or may not be all that great, but Kirk somehow or another figured out this deck that I think is pretty amazing. I've played it once and nearly got a win with it on the Maiden Voyage, so it's got legs for an Orzhov deck. So yeah, tell us about it.
The short version of it, so I don't know if many people are familiar with Radadrabic of Urborg. I don't even know what the hell set this thing's from. It's
Dominaria United. So last year.
Yeah, so it's black, white, and 2 for a 3/3. Vigilance, ward 2. other zombies you control have vigilance. Whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's non-legendary, and a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other colors. Not in this set, obviously. Why are we going over it? Well, it's because all of these cards that we're going to go over, which are Samwise, the Stouthearted, Gollum, Patient Plotter, the Nazgul, and then Boromir, Warden of the Tower, which we'll get into deeper. They all have the ring tempts you on either on ETB or on dies. So we should probably go over that, which is because this is a huge mechanic in that.
Yep.
From the Lord of the Rings set, the ring tempt you. It's a big deal. For those of you that don't know,
anytime it says the ring tempts you, you basically get an emblem that's the ring, and then there's 4 levels of it, and each time you're tempted, you go up a level. To our understanding, the levels stay regardless of if you change which one creature is your ring bearer. What we may be incorrect on that, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it reads. You can also be tempted without controlling a creature, without choosing a ring bearer. I know that much. But generally, it's like your ring bearer gets skulk on the first level. The second level, it's like a looting effect. Third level, something else. Fourth level, something else. I haven't gotten that far, personally, in games that I've played with any of these cards, but that's essentially what it does. What we more care about here is that...
first emblem-ish ability is your ring bearer becomes legendary. So you pick a creature that, if you don't have a ring bearer, you pick any creature, and it becomes legendary, and it gets essentially skulk, which is good for another card we'll talk about later. But it's just becoming legendary. So if you can do loops where you sack this, you get a token copy that's not legendary, the ring tempts you, it becomes a legend, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that's where those are all very interesting. I like the Ratadrabic deck quite a bit. Maybe I'll have Islaine throw the link to it, and you guys can check it out and tell me if you think it's hot garbage or if you think it's interesting. So
I think it's interesting.
That's why those are on the list.
Yeah.
Outside of those, I think Gollum and Samwise have some potential as cards. We'll see. It'll all depend on how powerful the ring tempting you actually is, which remains to be seen. But they're all decent.
I know some of the popper guys are liking Gollum. I think it's okay. For the most part, I think these are good in the deck that you built. Otherwise, I probably would have never paid attention to them. I think Nazgul is pretty cool because you can have up to 9 copies, and there are 9 individual art printings of them, which is awesome. You know, lore-wise is on point and pretty cool. I think that's more of a casual thing, though, because in general, race, if you look up on Scryfall, there's like 3 of them, and they're, well, maybe there's more than 3, but there was like hardly any that were worth playing, so... regardless, that's pretty much the end of our honorable mentions.
Yeah, the other piece about these, there were a ton more that we had written down that we were going to talk about. A lot of the set is unique in that there's not a whole ton of massively powerful cards for a lot of different decks, or that fit into a lot of different decks, I should say. But there are a lot of cards that have a little, carve out of a niche where they do fit in certain decks.
Yeah, I was going to say there's less staples and more niche cards in this set than I've seen in a while, and that kind of lends itself to being a core set. Same way as AFR was kind of the same way. There wasn't a ton of power. There's Minsk and some other cards that were just like, whoa, cool. And then other ones was just like, this is kind of shit until you actually played with it. And like, oh, you come to a river is actually pretty good because it's modal and blah, blah, blah.
Yep. Yeah, so I think it's a good set to support a lot of your lesser known commanders or less popular commanders, which I'm a huge fan of. Being a brewer and a player of many things, not always optimized. I'm a huge fan. So that being said, on to the good stuff.
So disclaimer, again, the last couple times we've reviewed a set on the podcast here, we've kind of done a top 10, and we actually had a hard time cutting it down to top 10. In this case, we had a hard time making 10, because a lot of those cards we just talked about, some of them we included in our top 10, and then we're like, either I vetoed it or he vetoed it, and we came to the point where we were like, yeah, it's not really good enough because it's so niche, or it's only going to go in this deck or that deck. So we came up with 8, and as we've said before, no particular order. Your mileage may vary. We don't know if, there's a couple of these that are guaranteed are going to see a lot of play. There's a couple of them where it's like, maybe, maybe not. That's just kind of where we are. But yeah, if you want to start us off, we'll get on with the first one.
Cool. The first card we're looking at is Borne Upon a Wind, not the Wind. 1 blue and 1 for an instant. You may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. Draw a card. So where I see this seeing a ton of play is in 2 types of decks. Anything that's playing Necropotence, you can activate your Necropotence till you're almost dead, move to end step, put all those cards in your hand, cast this, then unload your hand and go to town. Maybe also in non-chat Nas decks, your Ad Nas decks where you're end stepping and Ad Nas on an opponent's end step. Play this, play out all your mana rocks, etc. Then untap with your massive hand and more mana. That's the 2 big instances where I see this. As Lane, you pointed out, like Zur with decks that play like Shimmermere and whatever the new Urza's Battle Thopter thing.
Yeah.
Where those will let you flash in artifacts, where this one lets you do any spells. So
right. Like this being able to do that, it's kind of Emergence Zone, basically. It also draws you a card, so it does cost 2 mana, though, whereas Emergence Zone, I think, is only 1, and then you have to sack it.
Yeah,
so
1 tap it, so it's essentially 2 mana also, really.
Sure. And yeah, you're going down a land, so this is essentially, I mean, if you're already on Emergence Zone, like, it is easier to slot that in because it's a land, but in decks in the colors, it's possible. It's not Flash. It was kind of, people looked at it and were like, oh, it's the second coming of Flash, and like, no, it's not. It's not putting a thing into play and then sacking it so you can just win, but it can potentially put anything that's in your hand into play when you normally can't. So I don't know. I don't see it as being like a staple as far as like every blue deck's gonna play it, but I think that there are enough decks in the format that might want this. Also, just being a cantrip, pretty okay. I mean, any card that replaces itself is usually better than a card that doesn't. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's got that going for it.
Veil of Summer versus Autumn's Veil type argument. Sometimes you just jam it out there to draw a card. Where I think this one's really interesting is especially for me, it's in Necropotence, because I don't know about you, I've seen a huge fall off in people playing that particular card, and it's almost like Sporting Broodlord and Sonhalf kind of brought back Peer into the Abyss. In my eyes, I think this has the potential to do the same kind of thing of bringing back Necropotence. We'll see.
I mean, being able to cast the stuff that you were gonna discard into exile, pretty good. And also because, Necropotence is face down, you don't see it until your end step, and then it's gonna go to the bin, so being able to fire that off and use what's in your hand rather than just getting rid of it, that seems like a pretty good ask. And then again, like you said, instant speed Ad Nas. I've literally never cast an instant speed Ad Nas. I don't do it as a rule. I always just do it on my own turn because I'm more of a Final Fortune kind of player. Like, let's win the game with this and not do it on somebody's end step and sculpt. But I know that there are people that do that, so this is good for them.
Absolutely. What you got up next?
All right. Well, next one that we agreed on was Ringsight, which is kind of niche, but I think pretty much any deck in the colors specifically will probably run it. Anyhow, it's 1 and blue and a black, so 1 and Dimir. So I think Dimir lists are gonna like this, but it's a sorcery. It says the ring tempts you, so it has that mechanic, and if you are on that mechanic in some way, shape, or form, maybe that makes this even better. We're still kind of unsure on that, but either way, you can basically Demonic Tutor, because it's search your library for any card, but it has to share colors with a legendary creature you control. More than likely, you're doing this when you have your commander out, so it will be your colors. But maybe you are running some monocolor legendaries in your deck, and you can only get that one thing, but maybe it's the thing that you need. I don't know. People play Witchclaw Talisman. We've talked about it before, where, Grim Tutor versus Witchclaw. They're both 3 mana, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this can be played. The one deck that we agreed it would probably see the most play in is Yuriko, because the Ring Tempting gives Yuriko Skulk, which is good, so she can get in when she normally can't, as long as she's your Ring Bearer. Because, unless they have a Mana Dork, she can't be blocked. So that's pretty good alone. And then it's also a 3 mana, instead of flipping a Vamp Tutor and doing 1 damage to everybody, you flip this and you do 3 damage. Also, just basically any Dimir list. They're already on, all the black tutors, but this is just one more that does the same thing, and I don't think that's bad.
Yep, it gets your Thassa's Oracle or your Demonic Consultation if you have a Dimir Legend in play, which is not bad. It's more it's definitely more telegraphed because you have to reveal it. But Yuriko especially is another list where the blue-black piece of it is pretty relevant, because a lot of those lists play Commandeer is at the blue. Discard 2 blue cards, and you can cast them for free.
Yeah,
and Force of Will, and Force of Negation, and blah, blah, blah. You know, some of them play Misdirection still. So this is a blue card for all of those. Sure, it can be Red Elemental Blast, Pyroblast, because it's a blue card. That is a downside. But being that extra blue card to be able to pay for those free spells and those type of decks, pretty huge. Tivit might try this. I mean, notably, it can't get colorless artifacts, which kind of sucks. But being able to cast this in a Tivit where your Tivit has Ward, probably not going to get blown up if it's in play. Go find your Time Sieve piece and win. Maybe. I don't know. It's a thought.
Also, notably, I pointed out when we talked about this earlier, is that in a Tivit list, you slam him down, and let's say you have a Rhystic Study or something where you're drawing cards already. People are less likely to give you clues. They're more likely to give you treasures, and then you use the treasures to sack this to go get your Time Sieve. Or sack the treasures to cast this to get your Time Sieve, and boom, now you win, because maybe you already have some extra mana and you just cast the Time Sieve. I don't know, but either way. To the hand tutors are always going to be better than like top of the library or anywhere else, so I think this sees play.
It's very similar to a Wishclaw trade-off where you don't have to give this away like you do a Wishclaw, and or you can get stopped. So it's got that downside of having to reveal it, like a Worldly Tutor type thing. So definitely pluses, minuses, but like you said, tutors are tutors, and they'll probably be at least attempted in decks for a while.
The thing is that revealing doesn't really matter at the end of the day, because they either have the interaction or they don't. It doesn't matter if you tell them what I'm going to play, you know? So in that regard, I think it's fine. But yeah, I mean, I think pretty much any straight up Dimir list probably runs this. When you get to Grixis, maybe not, but like even then, it's literally any colors that your legendary controls. I mean, like, you could run this in a 5-color deck and be able to tutor up any card in your list if your commander's out that's 5 colors. So
yep, I see a lot of Esper lists playing this just because of the Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Tainted Tutor, or a Silence, or a Grand Abolisher.
Yeah, right. You can get pretty much anything.
Like you said, they'll have the interaction or they won't. Revealing it sucks, but if you're tutoring it in a lot of those decks, they can probably guess you're going for a win anyway. So
yep,
there you have it. The only thing that's downside, you can't go get your Mana Crypt if you really are behind on mana. But if you're that far behind on mana, you probably can't cast this anyway. So, yeah.
All right, what's next?
Up next, let's see. We have got Turn Scolding. All right, so this one, strap in, folks. This is a weird one. 1 blue mana, instant, counter target creature spell with power or toughness 2 or less.
We've literally had this discussion in the last like 2 or I don't know if we've done 2 of them or 3. I can't recall, but I think we've done 2. Either way, we've had a 1 mana counter spell that was narrow in both of the last 2 sets, and we talked about it, so that's kind of why it's on this list. This one I think sees more play than a couple of the other ones we talked about, because it was like
agreed.
CMC 1 or less, I think, was the one, and the other one was something else. Yeah, the other one I can't even remember at this point. I never played with either of them. This one, it hits basically all of the win cons, and I think that's why people are hyped on it. I don't know that you play this in a 5-color... I don't think you play this in a 5-color deck, because you just have better options. If you're in a mono-blue deck with hard control, or you're in Baral, or... God, what's the Drake guy?
Talrand.
Yeah, if you're in decks like that, where you're going to get value off of anything you cast, so you don't really care, and having just a density of counter spells to stop anything that's going to stop you, it's great. I mean, this is going to kill your... it's going to counter your Docksides, your Thassas, Dothies,
Grand Abolisher,
the Recruiters. Yeah, I mean, it hits a lot of Hate Bears. It hits... pretty much every Hate Bear is at least... 2 or less power, or 2 or less toughness. I mean, it hits your Kiki-Jikis, it hits your combat celebrants.
The white 3/3 censor from the last set's like one of that, and like Yusharn, or like the weird exceptions to that. Otherwise, all your Hate Bears are 2 or less power toughness for the most part. And
no, also, the censor was 3/2, so this hits that too.
Yeah. Well, never mind. There you go.
Yeah, so it hits like almost everything, but notably doesn't hit
the big list. So this is where it's hugely meta dependent, in my opinion. It's not going to stop Winota. Sure, it'll stop a lot of the little bears that Winota plays to get Winota going, but it doesn't stop Winota. It doesn't stop Crom. That's kind of a big deal. Doesn't stop Dargo. When that's happening, you're probably losing. It doesn't stop Atraxa. That's relevant as hell lately because that thing's been putting up numbers. It doesn't stop Tivit.
Tivit's been consistent for like the last 6 months.
Yeah, and if that deck's not fast as Oracle winning, then it doesn't give a crap about this card.
Nope.
Honestly. It doesn't counter a Ranger Captain of Eos, which that's pretty decent card. Doesn't stop a Gilded Drake, which I'm seeing less and less played, honestly, lately, but still, it's a card and it still will be around. Yep. Doesn't stop a Kenrith, a Bergi, Endurance, Mayhem Devil. There are a lot of very powerful cards that this does not stop. So I think it's meta dependent. Like you said, it's deck dependent. But this is better than a whole slew of options. I didn't think I'd be looking at a counter a creature specific spell that I'd be playing in CDH anytime. But with the power creep and creatures getting so much better and the slew of good ones that do get hit by this and it's only costing 1, those are all reasons that this will see play. It'll get slotted in a few of my decks, no doubt. I'll try it.
Well, there was the one that came out within the last couple of years. I want to say it's like Soul Snare or something like that, and it's like counter target creature spell. You know, same sort of like limitation. It's kind of narrow, but people have been playing it because it counters Thassa's and Dockside and this and that. I think this card might be slightly better just because it's like power and or toughness instead of just like, I think that one was like CMC 2 or less or something like that.
Sounds right.
I want to say it's Soul Snare. I cannot recall what it is, but I know that it was something that people were talking about around about, you know, places that I frequent, and I think this one might be a little bit better. I don't know, like, so when I did a set review on my last podcast of New Capenna, and that was when An Offer You Can't Refuse came out, and I specifically put that on that list, and I said, this is good. But I also made the argument that, like, sometimes it sucks because you counter something and then you give them 2 treasures and they use the 2 treasures to counter your shit again. But that's super edge case because in my time actually playing the card, that doesn't happen. You just counter the spell and that's it. They get some treasures and it's whatever. So I kind of called that card was going to be good right off the bat. And this one, it's obviously not as good, I don't think, at all. But it's still in that sort of ballpark where it's like narrow, but maybe, just maybe, this one ends up seeing some play. We'll see. I'm not really putting it on any considering lists as of right now, but I also don't play mono blue. I think, you know, maybe Azorius lists want this, because it's just another effect. I don't know. It's too early to tell, but I think it does have potential.
Yep, I think it's very... I would say the nearest comparison would maybe be like a Spell Snare, which is the 1 blue instant counter target spell with converted mana cost 2. Exactly 2. So this is kind of a similar thing.
Maybe that's. I think that might be the one that I was thinking of. What set did that come out?
God, forever ago, literally.
I thought it was within the last couple of years, but
that one's been out a long time. But
all right. Maybe
either
it's
way,
different.
so this one, because it can hit like a Najeela or a Tymna that costs 3, maybe this will see more play. I mean, as we've mentioned, there's a billion creatures, you know, Esper Sentinels on down that. Birds of Paradise, etc.
To be fair, it might be like, so I think that there's kind of a distinction between CEDH and quote unquote TEDH, like tournament CEDH. Like, if you're going into a tournament knowing you're playing against nothing but 5, 4, and 3 color best of the best, you know, maybe Winota, maybe a couple monocolors, but for the most part, it's like these big boogeymen of the format. Mm-hmm. And it'll hit most of them. You're just suffering when you get to the Tivits or the Croms or whatever. So
right, and that's the argument I would make too. Like, if this came out 2 years ago, it would have been a slam dunk at that time because you've had, you know, Dockside was out. I think it was 2 years ago. Drannith Magistrate was out. Fastest Oracle was the Boogeyman.
Dockside's been Thassa's and Dockside has been like 3-4 years at this point.
Grand Abolisher was running. I mean, all these things have been running around wrecking the format and giving people nightmares. But now that the formats, a lot of it has shifted too. You're seeing some of the big boy, the Tivits of the world and the Atraxas. I don't feel great countering a mana dork. I don't really want to waste mana stopping your Birds of Paradise hitting the battlefield. I will sometimes. I don't feel good about it.
That's a mental misstep kind of target, though. That's not you're not going to pay mana for that. This is definitely just being held in your hand for attempted wins and or combo pieces, Grand Abolishers, things that are going to stop you from being able.
Stop you. Yep.
Yeah, and in that regard, it's most likely in control lists and those that are going to be mostly mono blue and or, you know, blue plus maybe 1 color.
Yeah,
once you start getting, I mean, even just being an Izzet, I'd probably run the blasts over this.
Yeah, I could see it in some polymorph lists, like maybe like Shurikai polymorph or something too, where you're getting your
spell
command
slingers, less creatures, more counter spells. Sure,
you have more slots to fit, and you need your commander to come out. I could see it in something like that, but
sure,
who knows? This one's stronger than some of them they've given us. It's certainly given me something to look at and something I will try. I don't know how good it is. Again, I think it might be just kind of meta dependent. So
I also think that it's kind of just we've had a pattern of them coming out, so we kind of had to talk about it. It's like tradition at this point.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm going to skip the next one because that is, you kind of skipped over it and we wanted to deep dive that, and you know it better than I do. So we're going to move on to Delighted Halfling, which this one, as soon as I saw it, immediate slam dunk. This is a replacement for Boreal Druid, essentially. So it's a 1 green mana, 1/2, tap, add, colorless. So that's what Boreal Druid is, to a T.
Although Boreal Druid's a 1/1.
And also a snow permanent, which can be relevant if you, like, run
Jorn?
Search for Glory or Jorn. Yeah, otherwise, not relevant. What makes this better is because, a 1 green mana to add colorless, not great. And that's why I don't really run Boreal Druid, but I know a lot of mono green decks will or whatever, because it's just extra ramp. This also has tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. So this is your Cavern of Souls on a body. So, like, for instance, I can think of, like, Minx right off the bat. I run Cavern of Souls in that deck to make him uncounterable. This also can do the same thing, but it's also a mana dork. Like, he costs, bad example, he doesn't have any colorless pips in his casting cost. So this is only going to cast other things. But, turn 1 forest into this. Well, I guess that's a bad example because you can't use it right away. But, you drop this down and then the second turn it's tapping into a Soul Ring or whatever. Even in casual, that's not bad. And it's legendary spell. So it doesn't have to be your commander. It can be any legendary, including artifacts, enchantments, etc. There are some sorceries and whatnot that came out in, like, OG Dominaria. Urza's Ruinous Blast can be not countered because of this.
Where I see this one being super scary is, like you said, it can be legendary spells. So this can make your Teferi Time Raveler uncounterable.
Yeah. Any of your planes, your Vivian in Minx is also uncounterable because of this.
Is Bolus the Citadel legendary? Anyway.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, legendary spells. And so in similar
the one ring, which we're going to talk about soon, some of the other cards that came out in this are legendary. There's been tons of legendary artifacts and creatures and spells throughout the years to the point where this can make a lot of stuff. And then it's just, it's a Birds of Paradise that makes your shit uncounterable.
Your Legends is great. And it's a 1/2, which I had somebody rage out saying, how is a halfling citizen a 1/2 when human soldiers are 1/1s? And it's because it's a halfling. It's a 1/2. Anyway. Where this card's amazing also, it's where are they going with
fucking
that?
Dad jokes for the win, man.
I can't help myself. It is what it is, buddy. But yeah, I mean, being a legendary spells are uncounterable. It's in some ways a lot better than Cavern of Souls, just because it can cast multiple legends and doesn't matter their creature type. So this card I think is going to be, if not the best card from this set for CDH, it might be the most played card from this set for CDH.
I think every single deck that's playing green plays this, because if at bare minimum it makes your commander uncounterable.
Yeah.
At bare minimum. Otherwise, whatever else that's in your deck that's legendary is also now uncounterable. And like you said, with the Cavern of Souls having to pick a creature type, this doesn't have that requirement, so it's better. Now, granted, it's on a body, so it's going to get removed a lot easier, but, being a 1/2, like you said, that makes it a little different. It can't get hit by Gut Shot, not that that's played, but any of those little...
ETB.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's also, all the little pingers and shit, yeah, so it protects from that as well. So I think it's a slam dunk.
It's also interesting because it is a better attacker for, like, a Tymna deck if you need to send it into combat. I mean, hell.
Yeah, you can go at tokens. They have one token. You can throw it at Ragavan. Yeah, it'll trade, but do they really want to give up the Ragavan? Maybe not.
Yeah.
It also blocks Ragavan, so they're not stealing your shit. You just kill it.
Yep. Interesting thing about this, it does say add a colorless or tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast legendary spells. So it doesn't matter if you're casting the One Ring, tap this, add green mana to your mana pool, use it to cast the One Ring. Make sure you're announcing that you're doing that so some judge call doesn't come over and be like, you didn't say you were using colored mana to make it uncounterable. Now it's countered. Screw that. That shit will happen. Make sure if you're doing it, though, announce that you're using it for the second ability. So your legend's uncounterable. Please don't get burned out by some rules friggin' psycho. Anyway.
So yeah, the other one, you did mention it slightly when we were talking about that Ratadrabic list, but why do you think this guy belongs on the list?
This card I am beyond jazzed for, and maybe I'm wrong, but whatever. Boromir, Warden of the Tower. 1 white, 2 colorless, 3/3 human soldier. It's a legendary creature, human soldier.
Myrel cares.
There you go. It's got vigilance. That's always a good thing. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. So suck it, Fierce Guardianship, or Force of Negation, or Force of Will, pay
Deflecting
for them, or
swap.
they're countered. Yeah, get out of here. Also, all of your opponents' Jewel Lotuses and mana, blah, blah, blah. Mox Diamond, Chrome Mox. Get out of here. That shit's all countered. It's very similar to Lavinia, and I can't even remember which Lavinia it is. The blue-white Lavinia. I gotta look her up, because now I'll get mad if I don't remember it. Azorius Renegade. There you go. So she's similar to this card in that regard. She would say if whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell.
She has another line of text, which is different, but yeah, same idea.
So this one is great for, like, if you have, like, Possibility Storm. I don't know if you know what that one does from the Possibility Storm channel.
I mean, I think I should.
One would hope. But that one, whenever a player casts a spell from his or her hand, that player exiles it. Exile cards from top of their library till you exile a card that shares a type with it. You can cast it without paying its mana cost. Can't with this guy in play, it'd be countered. So it's good for that kind of a weird lock.
Which is also a lock with Drannith Magistrate and Lavinia. This is now a third version of that, so if you are in Azorius, you can have all 3 of these. Well, you would need to be also in red. So Jeskai, you can have all 3 of these, plus Possibility Storm, plus Uba Mask, and I think Omen Pool is the other one.
Yeah,
and you can have
weird shit.
3 hard locks on people not being able to really do shit, which is fucked, and nobody will like you. But I guess notably, his next line of text is what makes him, I think, better than Lavinia, and you would probably agree.
And that's my stands 100% on why I like this one better. It says, sacrifice Boromir, Warden of the Tower. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. The ring tempts you. The ring tempts you is great for the Boromir line, because you can just this and Ratadrabic just loop together for infinite dies triggers and ETB triggers. Anyway, that's another story. This is great because, sure, you can protect your stuff from a Culling Ritual if you have a bunch of dorks out and somebody blows it and tries to get a bunch of mana. Great, you can stop that from at least killing your mana dorks, etc. But the problem I run into with Lavinia, Azorius Renegade Leader, or whatever she's called, the most is, I swear it never fails. Player 1 will have the winning combo. They're going for their win. Player 2 has Lavinia in play. Player 2 has Fierce Guardianship, for instance. Player 3 has Lavinia in play. Player 2 can't counter Player 1's win attempt. It's like you're the wrong stacks piece. It's almost as bad as Wheels a lot of time, where you're giving away the win because you're stopping the wrong people from interacting with your other opponents, and then they accidentally win and nobody can do anything about it. Where I love this card is if your opponent says, hey, I've got this piece of interaction that's free. I can't do anything with it because you have this in play. I pass priority. I can now sacrifice this, creating another round of priority. Now they can cast their spell. Yeah. It still does all the same protections for me on a better body, a 3/3 for 3 with vigilance. Granted, she's a 2/2 for 2, which is cheaper in blue and blah, blah, blah. But the nice thing about this is you can get it out of your own way if you need to on a table, which I can't tell you the number of times that has happened to me where stupid Lavinia, Hinata was a deck I built for a while, tried it, tore it apart because of the same kind of problem. It stops opponents from interacting. Teferi is the same kind of a problem a lot of times.
I was going to say 3 Fairy is the same issue.
Nothing more annoying than, like, I can stop my opponent who's trying to win, but my other opponent stopped me from stopping my opponent who's trying to win, and they're not winning. Oh, it's
the defense grid and Dosin and all those things. Yep. They're great if you can drop them on your turn or, basically on your turn and then win as a result. Otherwise, not great. It's kind of the same problem like Grand Abolisher has that problem too a little bit, in the sense that like if somebody wanted to try and interact on your end step while they had the mana to do the thing, so that then they can go. I've had that happen where it's like, man, if they didn't have the Grand Abolisher, I could on their end step kill this thing that's stopping me, and then on my turn win. But I can't because it's their turn and I don't have enough mana. So there's a lot of effects that do that. But yeah, this is kind of a fixed Lavinia in that sense.
It breaks parity massively on it, because not only does it only work for you stopping your opponent's crap, it can't be Gilded Draked away, because they target with Gilded Drake, you sack the damn thing, for instance. So they can't steal this ability either from you like they could on a Lavinia, but it can get out of your own way when you need it to, which is why I love this. It has combo potential. It's a great protect your own turn kind of piece. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, initially when I saw it in your Red Drabic list, I was like, okay, yeah, I this doesn't seem great, but it combos, so cool. But now seeing it a little bit more and talking about it more in depth, it's like, okay, yeah, it does have that stop everybody, but sack it if you need to, so they can stop people if they need to. Also protects you against board wipes, and then also gives you that skulk ability, even though maybe you don't have any other ring temps you stuff in your deck. It at least, you know, makes one thing be able to attack freely, which is not bad.
Yeah, so it does quite a bit, and it's a solid stacks piece on a solid body, solid abilities. I think it's not Ranger of Eos good. I'll get that out of the way right now. No. But it is, I think, the next best iteration of that type of effect on a white stacks piece for protecting your own wins. That's my opinion.
It's not bad. It's not bad at all.
Plus, he's just, it's just Boromir. He's just sacrificing himself to save everybody once again.
Damn Sean Bean, always dying.
Always dying. Who's with that?
This is lot in life. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead to the next one, and then we're going to backtrack to that one for you, and then we're both going to tackle the last one because I think that seems good. Sound good? Great.
Perfect.
All right, so next one, I brought it up when we were talking about Top Instance. I actually put it on my list because it had been spoiled at that point, and because I think that it's that good, but we ended up cutting it because we realized, well, it's not legal yet, and maybe we should just leave it off. It's Reprieve. It's 1 and a white instant. Return target spell to its owner's hand. Draw a card. So, closest thing to a counter spell that we've gotten for white since, what is it? Not Memory Lapse. What's the 3-mana one that puts it on the top of the library?
God, I can't remember what it's called, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and then there's Mana Tide, which is counter target spell unless they pay 1. Those are like literally the only two.
Wicked and some other weird ones.
Yeah, Rebuff is if a counter target spell that's targeting a creature you control, which is fine but narrow.
What's the white one that I'm playing in my Omnath deck? It gives all your crap hexproof. It's more similar to that. Anyway,
that's the one we talked about in the last set. Yep. Gives everything hexproof or something.
Yeah,
I don't know. We're anyway, old.
Moving on to
we forget. Yeah, so this card is it's basically a functional reprint of a blue card that does essentially the same thing, but says counter target spell instead of return. And that is actually what makes it a big difference. This is closer, I guess, to like Narset's Reversal in that regard, because it's like return a spell to an owner's hand, but then you got a copy, so a little different. But anyway, in white, you don't get a lot of these, and this is essentially a counter spell for 2 mana that replaces itself because you do draw a card, which is great. And it's target spell, so it doesn't matter if it's an instant, sorcery, creature, artifact, planeswalker, enchantment, doesn't matter. Battle. It hits everything. And it also notably gets around anything that says this spell cannot be countered. So Abrupt Decay, targeting your thing, you say, no, reprieve that. That goes back to your hand. Hopefully they don't have enough mana to recast it. And you draw a card to replace it. If you're in, blue, maybe you don't play this. But if you're in any other combination with white, this is a slam dunk.
I think you'll see a lot of play. I love it in the non-counter aspect of it. In decks that you're facing an opponent that's got Allosaurus Shepherd in play, and they go for their big finale of devastation, and you're like, boop, back end you go.
Or they drop their food chain, or they drop their, they actually hard cast, which hopefully nobody's doing this, but they hard cast a Protean Hulk. You put it back in their hand.
It happens.
I mean, it could happen. So yeah.
Sometimes you draw the damn thing. Anyway.
I mean, they hard cast. I literally just the other day playing a Crick deck hard cast Peer into the Abyss. Somebody could have used this card and put it right back in my hand, and there was no way I was casting it again. And then they know I have it, so then they either go Mystical Tutor for a counterspell, or a Deflecting Swat, even better. Yeah.
If something weird happens where you play something, somebody goes to counter your own spell, and you're like, I really need this. You can counter your own spell, return your own spell back to your hand, draw a card. There's all sorts of... It's similar to Remand in that regard. Remand being able to counter something, there are a few cards in blue that do care if you specific keyword counter something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, just the non-counter part of it is just better. I mean, bouncing the hand without reading the word counter is probably better. Just...
I mean...
We talked about all those... what's the Destiny Spinner, and there's all sorts of weird can't be countered kind of crap that this just doesn't care about.
Yep. Cavern of Souls, the other card we just talked about.
Delighted Halfling. There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Does not care. You still put it back in their hand. So it gets around all of those things. If you're in mono white, this is like the best counter spell type effect that you're going to get. If you're in, like I said, if you're in like Azorius, maybe you don't run this. But every other white X deck is running this, for sure.
They're at least considering it. If you're on a heavy, like if you're on a 4-color or something, sans blue, you might not. But...
I meant 2-color. Like any of the 2 colors minus Azorius, like Orzhov, Selesnya, Boros.
They're taking a hard look at this card for their list, for sure.
I've put it on considering on all of my lists that are in those colors. I think it's really good.
Yeah, so many of those decks lack the ability to interact on the stack, and this can add this. I mean, if you're playing Boros, you're playing like Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast.
This is just in addition to, because it's just as narrow, but it's like now you have an additional thing on the stack.
I mean, would you rather be casting this or Tybalt's Trickery?
This. For sure.
So,
this.
Yeah. There you go. So there you have it. And that's he's tons to play, so there you have it.
Next one for you.
Is this the One Ring?
This is the One Ring.
All right. Exciting times. So this one's super controversial. Whatever.
When it got spoiled, honestly, I was like, sorry, but when this got spoiled, I was like, meh. And then people were like, no, dude, no, you're not understanding. And I'm like, meh. And then I actually saw it in play, and I was like, okay, I kind of get it. Like, I don't think it's like format warping or super busted, but in some decks, it's just really good. And in general, it's pretty good as far as the draw engine goes. But anyway, read the card.
4 mana, the One Ring, legendary artifact, indestructible. When the One Ring enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you gain protection from everything until your next turn. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. And it has tap, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So the turn you cast it, if you cast it, it's indestructible. You have hexproof. You permanently have you have hexproof for the turn. You can't be brain freezed out, I guess. Anyway.
Yep. Or burnt out, or whatever. You can't be tormented of hellfire for 12.
There you go. You tap it, draw a card, put a burden counter on it. The next turn, you lose a life. You tap it, you put a counter on it, you draw 2 cards. Turn after that, you lose 2 life, you tap it, you draw 3, etc., etc. So,
I've seen it get up to like 5 or 6, and like the person literally destroyed their life total, but they drew comparable amounts to... it's not quite Ad Naus, because, Ad Naus is built around, and you could probably draw like 20 cards, but give or take. Same with Peer. Peer is going to draw you a hell of a lot more, but costs a lot more, and blah, blah, blah. This takes time, but in artifact-heavy lists, or, like just being able to have card draw that you wouldn't have in your colors normally, it's just another colorless artifact that draws you cards. I mean, that's going to be beneficial for Boros and other color combinations that just don't have a fuck ton of card draw. But it's getting pretty evenly spread across the board to where most color combinations can draw cards, can do pretty much functionally the same thing as everything else. It's just we're getting little slices of this, little slices of that as cards get printed. Mm-hmm. I think it's more notably busted when you can bounce it. So like in blue or whatever, like you can do this 2 or 3 times and then
or blink it with Brago or something.
Right. Like when you can reuse it and not kill yourself, it's pretty good.
Yep, where I see it being really, really busted is with
Mind Over Matter. Jesus
Mind
Christ.
Over freaking Matter. Whether that card hits the battlefield with this, GG, buddy. And that one, that's a 4 blue pips and 2 enchantment. choose and discard a card, tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land. So with the One Ring, tap it, draw a card, throw away the card you drew, untap it, tap it, draw 2 cards, throw away one of those cards, untap it, tap it, draw 3 cards, throw, etc., etc. You can draw your whole deck and have a crap ton of cards left over in your hand to protect whatever win con you're going for. That's where this card is just gross. Also, decks that have like multiple untap triggers, like a Derevi. If you need a big draw engine, this hits. You untap. You put 3 untap triggers on this and tap it each time in between. Draw a bunch of cards. Emery is one of the mono blue ones. If you have a way to sack this and you can recast it from your grave every turn, draw a card.
You're not taking the damage. Is the thing.
Yeah.
So if you could abuse not taking the damage, this becomes really good.
Even better.
I think people bitched initially because it's 4 mana, but like honestly, how hard is it to make 4 generic? Like it's super easy, and I mean
I'm gonna try this on my Godo list just because I play Voltaic Key and Mana Vault. I think it's not Mana Vault. What's the other Voltaic Key card?
I don't know. Manifold Key.
Same, yeah. I'm gonna try in that because that's mono red deck that wants to draw more cards. So and a 4 mana card is nothing in that deck.
Anything that can untap artifacts or just permanents in general. Plus, it's also notably legendary, so anything that allows you to tutor for legendary things will let you tutor for this. If you're in blue, which, like, the deck that I saw it played in was Urza, mono blue Urza, which it was just like, yeah, they just kept using it, and then, yeah, anyway. So, easy to tutor for with blue, with all the artifacts, tutors that it has, so...
Yeah, I'm
pretty strong.
I'm really excited to try this out from one of our set reviews. Unctus, I still have that deck built, and this set got this and Ioith, or whatever the hell, the House of Healing card. Both make that deck even more amazing and more fun. So
blue untappers, definitely good. Yeah, I think with Unctus, for sure, seems good, because you can, with that other card you just mentioned, you can untap 2 legendaries, so you untap this and your commander. What was it that Unctus did when you tapped him? It's like loot.
You draw a card and discard a card.
All right, so yeah, you could loot
or any blue creature. I think it is.
Jesus Christ! So yeah, you can
do weird shit with this and draw a whole ton of cards. So
yeah, it seems pretty good. All right, we got one more card. This one is the one that everybody's talking about. You've probably already seen it talked about yourself. It's Orcish Bowmasters. It's a mono black. 1 and a black for a 1/1 Orc Archer with Flash. Very similar design to a lot of the things we've already talked about in all of our lists and set reviews and things. This mechanic has become kind of a staple for several years now, but we only see it every once in a while. Anyways, it says whenever it ETBs, and whenever an opponent draws a card except for the first one they draw on each of their draw steps, it deals 1 damage to any target. And then you amass Orcs 1. So amass, if you don't remember, goes back to War of the Spark. And it was amass an army, and they were zombies. It was Liliana's like thing, basically. Because she was the necromancer that raised all the dead and blah, blah, blah. So it was like some kind of story tie-in, but... Basically, amass was create a 0/0 with a counter on it, and then anytime you did anything else that said amass, you get one more 1/1 counter on that army. Now it's amass orcs, which makes sense thematically for this, because Urkai and orcs and blah blah blah, and Sauron and all of them making a fuck ton of orcs.
Spoiler alert is Lane, come on. What are you doing?
Oh, I'm sorry. If you haven't seen or read Lord of the Rings since it's like 100 years of existence, I'm sorry. Spoilers.
This makes a 1/1 Orc Tolkien. Sorry.
Fucking Gen Z people that don't understand. Anyway, yeah, so it has that same sort of mechanic. It's just orcs instead of zombies, but it functionally same exact thing. So this is an ETB effect that can just kill one thing. That's a 1 toughness. More notably, can combo off with other things, and that's why it's kind of making waves right now. A few years ago, we had Commander Legends, and there was this card called Hull Breacher, and it was a very similarly designed card. It was 1 in blue and 2, had Flash, ETB, players draw cards outside of, same shit, but you made treasures and they couldn't draw, or whatever the case was.
Yep.
It ended up getting banned because it essentially read, play a wheel, flash this in, everybody doesn't draw shit, and you make 21 treasures. Like, if they were going to draw a card, instead, you make a treasure. So, you got to empty their hand, you got 21 treasures, and most likely you won. This is not that. This is more like, play a wheel, flash this in, everybody still draws. 21 damage goes on the stack that you get to choose how you deal out. So, you either wipe their boards, or you take somebody down half their life, whatever the case may be, but then you also make a 21/21 orc army that doesn't have flat or haste or anything, but, you know, could potentially be used to kill someone on the next turn, or maybe you can give it haste, or maybe you do something crazy like use a Chandra's Ignition and fucking hit everybody for 21 to the face. I don't know. I don't know also if you're wheeling into another wheel and then you wheel again and everybody's just dead. You know, there's a lot of potential here. I don't know necessarily that it's going to be as broken as everybody thinks, but it's definitely got some potential, and it's actually making me, like, as we already said, you know, the Broodlord kind of brought Peer back into favor, and the other card we were just talking about might bring, I don't even remember what the analogy was that we made, but...
For Necropotence, yep.
Yeah, Necropotence. And then...
Up on the wind, yep.
This one may be the thing that kind of brings wheels back, because they can be used offensively. Maybe the Opus Thief kind of thing makes a comeback, because now there's an offensive way to do it. It's, again, not as good as Hull Breacher, but it's pretty good. And then anybody who's on a Rhystic or a Mystic, they might decide not to draw cards because you might ping down everything on their table, or you might just keep pinging them in the face. So it's got a lot of uses, and I think it's really good, and I think it's going to see play across the board in any deck that can play it, at least until we figure out whether or not it's as broken as we think.
I think it's pretty damn good. I mean, the 2 mana make 2 bodies also helps you convoke, cast a Horde and Broodlord. It's
True.
Great in Cloudstone Curio loops because it's an ETB.
That was something I didn't even think about until you brought that up earlier. Being able to... You could actually do this with Dockside, too.
Yep.
So it's Dockside, make treasures, this, do damage, and then you just bounce them back and forth.
Also make a giantly big orc. I mean, what's not to love? I mean, what's not to love? What's also crazy about this is there's scenarios where you're playing this with Windfalls or Wheel of Fortune type effects. And let's say you're playing Phyrexian Altar as well, and for each draw trigger that goes on the stack, you do a damage, make an orc. You could sack that orc out of mana.
Yeah.
Boom, you have another new 1/1, sack it, draw. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy crap that this enables. Being just that it's an ETB, where they made this one so much better is that it has that as an ETB and a trigger, not just when your opponents do that. Yeah.
Right, because like Fairy Mastermind was just if they draw the second card. Crom is just the second spell.
So just being an ETB, pinging things. I mean, if at its floor it comes into play, it makes 2 bodies and kills an Esper Sentinel, that's not the worst. It's killing Birds of Paradise, it's killing elves, it's killing Fairy Masterminds.
I mean, if you're also in Rakdos and you're doing like the instead of Cloudstone, there's also the Ruthless Technomancer with Dockside.
There you go.
I don't know that.
If you can create infinite treasure, you could then start doing. If you have the sack outlet, you could start.
If you have the Goblin Bombardment, you can use this to sack it, and then potentially,
Altar of Dementia or Altar of
whatever. So
this card has all sorts of interesting potential. Being a 2 mana, make 2 dudes, not the worst either. And like you said, I mean, if it stops a Rhystic Study player or a Mystic Remora player from drawing extra cards, that just feels excellent.
Or even, Esper and Archivist.
You can't choose not to, so that's just dying. I mean, and the fact that you can dome people with it or their creatures, it's not just creatures. It's great. You can kill so much with this little 2 mana 1/1 thing with Flash. I think this is the most powerful card from this set in a wide variety of decks.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll see as much play as Delighted Halfling, which... Notably, that's where being a 1/2 is better in Delighted Halfling because it doesn't die to this damn thing.
However, if you do have the Goblin Bombardment, you sack the other thing and you kill it anyway. So if you do have some sort of sack outlet for the orcs that does damage, you've got that. Or if you have like Impact Tremors, that's 2 damage right away. This with Curio Loops with an Impact Tremors just wins the game with the Goblin Bombardment. Maybe not because you don't maybe have the. I think it kind of helps Impact Tremors a little bit because you may not have the recursion for it. I mean, Technomancer can do the recursion thing too, but you usually do Dockside. I guess you do the loop with Dockside enough to make the infinite treasures, and then you do the loop with this to kill the table. But you also could just do the Mayhem Devil thing. Either way, lots of options.
Similar to Mayhem Devil in that way. I mean, it's just a great card, and at 2 mana with Flash, it's going to make your. I mean, wheels were already sketchy, to say the least, in a lot of decks. The fact that this can kill a Notion Thief and can kill Esper Sentinels and can kill all those things, and it's just a value 2 mana with Flash and Black. I mean, this card's great. This card will see a ton of play, I think. I don't think it's breaking the format, as anyone's scared, because it still does died removal, and it dies to another one playing an Orcish Bowmaster. You shoot their Orc, but it's still going to see a lot of play. It's very powerful. If even one time this stops my opponent from drawing an extra card because they're afraid of whatever dying, hey, that seems great too. So
yeah, I think that it countering the blue and or white card advantage cards, like I think that's a good selling point. Weaponizing wheels, still very risky. You may end up wheeling somebody into removal for it, etc., etc. But you could then, in conjunction, use things like Notion Thief and or Narset to clear their hand first, and then play this. I don't know. That seems a little involved and kind of too many working pieces, but I think with just what we've discussed here, it works and it does the thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it can give your Tymna opponents and or your what's your favorite blue-green legend? It can give them pause on drawing too many extra cards. So
Thrasios, yeah, Thrasios drawing extra cards. Thrasios plus Seedborn Muse. Yep. This just fucking yes, love it. They will just not do it because they're just going to lose their board.
Yep.
Or they're only going to do it 3 times because what was he? Is he a 1/3? He's a 1/3. So yeah, they only do it 2 times because otherwise.
And then their turn doesn't take 20 minutes like it normally does. But anyway,
I like that. That's good.
Yeah, I love this card.
Notably, I have not actually cast this yet, but I did put it. I brewed a Sauron the Dark, the Grixis Sauron. I did put this in the list. I am in the process of deciding whether or not I want to include wheels, because I did not do that initially. I just put this in because it just seemed like, incidental value. But I will say that his ability to, where anybody casts, any of your opponents cast a spell and you amass Orcs 1 is insane. I've literally cast him and in one go around the table had a 16/16. Because somebody cast something, there was a counterspell war, interaction happened, blah, blah, blah. We got to a point where it was my turn, I have a 16/16. And that's where, like, the Chandra's Ignition comes into play, where it's just like, slam that, kill 2 opponents because they're low. And you also have a 7/6 commander that just smashes their face and has ward, like, sacrifice legendary shit, which is crazy. I wanted to put him on this list, but arguably, there may be better Grixis commanders, but he feels really good right now. I would recommend. I can put the deck list in the show notes, but I would recommend checking him out. He's got some cool abilities. It's sad because he does have that draw 4, discard and draw 4. It's sad that you can't trigger this off of your own stuff, because then maybe you could do some self wheeling, which would be fun. But either way, I think this is kind of a stacks against other people having extra card draw, and I think that makes it really fucking solid.
Yep, I love this guy in the set we didn't go over recently because it was a weird one, but that new Ob Nixilis, the Kingpin, can't wait for this card for that deck.
The Aftermath. Yeah, we didn't bother with that one because it was like 50 cards, and there was like 2 or 3 of them that were even worth mentioning, so it wasn't really something to talk about. But that Kingpin definitely has some legs, I think.
And this card is great in that deck.
Yeah. I also think that there have been some cards, not that this is a good idea, but there have been some, and also I can't think of any off the top of my head, outside of like Flump and some other weird like white cards that like force your opponents to draw cards in with YouTube. I mean, you could also do it with like Gaia Reach Sanitarium or anything else that like, makes people draw cards. It's just extra damage if you need it to get to, killing a Hate Bear or whatever the case may be. But yeah, there's been some
little mono black Rankle guy. You can
I was gonna say I knew there was cards that actually forced people to draw, and you don't really want that. But you know, in the case of you're killing their prized possessions or killing them in general, that's
yeah,
not
you can
bad.
weaponize it. It's not so bad. And make a big old giant orc in the process. So
Yeah. So I don't know if this is actually going to make wheels good again in my eyes, but it's the closest thing that's come up in a while.
it's kind of a double-edged sword because it almost makes wheels good if you're playing them, and worse if your opponents are playing them. So it's almost like it's going to be less likely to see wheels because this damn thing exists. And I don't want to wheel of fortune if my opponent's going to flash this fucking thing into play.
Honestly,
in response,
though,
so.
but the thing is that when Hullbreaker or Hull Breacher was legal, everybody was running wheels because they could weaponize them, but they could also drop that in when somebody else cast a wheel. So it's the same thing. In this case, that guy casts a wheel, you flash this in, they're still taking the damage. So, like, does it make it worse or better? I don't know. Or if there's 3 Grixis decks at the table and they can all run all the wheels, but they can also run this, is it just whoever gets it out first? Like, I don't know.
Or second, kill the other one. I don't know. Yeah, this is gonna be a weird card to see. I'm excited. I'm still not inclined to run very many wheels, but this card is still going to see a lot of play in my decks.
I'm looking at more like being at minimum Rakdos and running shit like Chandra's Ignition and or like fling effects and other things, because especially with that Sauron, man, like I'm telling you, being able to make this thing huge and then fling it and then make another one that's huge and then fling it, like it just seems so good. There's only so many cards that do that. I mean, there's like Gravitic Punch and some other ones that like do it to a single target. So maybe over the course of time you can make a couple armies that you sack and or use in various ways to do damage, but I don't know, man. There's a lot of possibilities, so I guess that's really all we can say about it.
A storm of possibility.
Oh, hey, he said the thing. All right, so I guess our question to the listeners here this week is going to be, is there anything that we missed? Do you agree and or disagree? Do you think our honorable mentions should be in the main list? We really had a hard time with this. Again, I think the set is full of great shit to go in the 99 of certain lists. Not a lot of staples. Like the Orcish Bowmaster, the Reprieve, the Delighted Halfling, those are about it when it comes to like staples. The rest of them are all kind of niche and build around. So we'll see. We'll see. Maybe there are some that we have missed that will end up being better than we thought. Some of these that we talked about might end up being worse than we thought. And that's just kind of the way it goes. We don't know until we see people break stuff and or play it ourselves. So again, if you guys want to let us know in the comments, what do you think we missed? Do you have any comments on any of the things that we mentioned here, and or something that you think we thought sucks is better than we thought because we misread it? I don't know. You tell us. Let us know what you guys think. And we're gonna wrap it up here. Next week in a couple weeks. Next episode, we have a special guest coming on, and we're gonna have a conversation about Storm, which is near and dear to my heart. So look forward to that. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks for hanging out, watching, listening, commenting, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you later.
Take care, everybody.